My name is Marissa Blake, and I'm 28 years old. I never imagined I'd be standing outside my own family's Christmas dinner, holding a gift in my hand, only to be told I wasn't needed. I looked at my mother. She didn't even flinch. "Did you really think they saved you a seat?" she said, almost amused. "This is a family thing." I nodded, smiled just enough to hide the sting. "Then maybe it's time I stop pretending I'm still part of this family," I said, and turned around. "Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from. Tap that like button, and subscribe if you've ever had to walk away from a family that never truly saw you." Let's rewind a little. I live alone in a small apartment about 45 minutes outside of Portland. It's quiet, full of books and sunlight and peace. I work in data analysis, which is just a fancy way of saying I spend my days making sense of other people's chaos. It's funny how good I am at sorting things out for strangers, yet somehow I could never quite fix the tangle that is my own family. I'm the oldest of two. My sister Tanya is 2 years younger and the sun around which my parents orbit. She's bright, charming, and effortlessly adored. Growing up, she was the one with trophies lining her bedroom wall. I had journals stacked under my bed. Tanya played piano. Tanya danced. Tanya got invited to everything. And I made myself useful. I helped cook, cleaned up, studied hard, stayed quiet. It's not that they ever said they loved her more. It was how they looked at her, like she was a miracle they still couldn't believe belonged to them, and how they looked at me, like I was a placeholder, a phase they'd outgrow. There's this one memory I can't shake. I must have been about 10. It was Tanya's birthday, and we were at this huge park with balloons, catered food, a clown, and 30 screaming kids. She was glowing in a sparkly dress, opening box after box of new toys. My birthday had been 2 weeks earlier. I got a chocolate cupcake, 1 candle, and a $20 bill slipped into my backpack by my dad with a quick pat on the head. That's how it always was. Not cruel. Just clear. Clear who mattered. You learn early not to expect too much. You tell yourself they're just busy. You're more mature. You don't need the attention. You're strong. That word haunted me for years. Strong. What they meant was silent, invisible, convenient. As we grew older, it got more subtle but no less painful. Tanya would come home from college with a new boyfriend. The whole family would gather, laugh, pour wine, ask questions, make him feel like royalty. I introduced a man I dated for 2 years. No one even asked his last name. At first, I thought I could earn my place. I worked harder, took on more, paid for things quietly, showed up, smiled, waited. But the acknowledgement never came. Not in words. Not in gestures, just the occasional "you're so independent" tossed at me like a compliment, when really it was just another way of saying, "We don't worry about you, and we don't think about you either." So, this Christmas, I'd baked a pie. I'd wrapped a scarf I thought my mom would love. I'd even ironed the blouse she always said looked professional, just in case she noticed. But instead, I stood on the porch while my name wasn't on the guest list. And I heard my mother say I didn't belong, and I felt for the first time not just excluded but freed. Because in that moment I realized I'd been standing outside for years. I just never had the courage to admit it. Not until now. I used to think all families had favorites. I mean, isn't that just part of growing up? Realizing love isn't always fair? But when you're the one on the quiet side of that imbalance, you start learning to read between the lines. You get good at noticing what isn't said, where the eyes linger, who gets asked about their day and who doesn't. My childhood wasn't a tragedy, it was just muted. Tanya was fireworks. I was a desk lamp. She was the one they called our little star. I was our rock, which sounds noble until you realize rocks don't shine. They just hold still and take the weight. There were so many little moments that didn't feel like much at the time. A dozen small cuts, never deep enough to scream, but together they left a scar I could trace in my sleep. Like the year Tanya got her braces. Full orthodontic work, custom rubber bands in school colors. My mom drove her to appointments, packed her smoothies, bought her lip gloss because braces make your smile look dry. They even threw her a bye-bye braces party. When I needed glasses, my dad took me to the discount shop. 2 pairs, no name frames, no fuss. "Just don't lose them," he said. I didn't. I kept them clean and polished, even when they made my face look like I'd borrowed someone else's identity. There was the time I got straight A's for 3 semesters in a row. I left the report card on the kitchen table thinking, just maybe, someone would say something. My dad read it between sips of coffee and said, "Good. That's expected." Then he turned to Tanya and asked how her dance recital prep was going. I told myself it didn't matter, that I didn't need the applause, that I was fine. But fine is a lonely place to live. At school, I started volunteering for things, tutoring, library assistant, anything to feel useful. I wasn't the girl people invited to sleepovers. I was the one they asked for help with essays. Even my teachers noticed it. One of them once wrote on my paper, "You don't need to be perfect to be worthy." I didn't understand what she meant back then. I just thought she was wrong. Of course I did. Worthy people get noticed, don't they? Looking back, I don't think my parents meant to hurt me. I really don't. They were just distracted by Tanya's light, and I'd learned so well how to disappear. That's the thing about being the invisible child. You start thinking invisibility is a gift, a kind of superpower. You can move through rooms unnoticed, listen without interrupting, never cause trouble, never ask for too much. You tell yourself it's a strength, until one day you wake up and realize you don't actually know what it feels like to be seen. There's this photo from one of our family vacations. We were in Lake Tahoe, the sun was shining. Tanya had just gotten her learner's permit, and she was allowed to drive the rental car into town with my dad. My mom took the picture. Tanya's in the front, laughing. Dad's looking at her proudly. And I'm in the back seat, barely visible behind a headrest. That's the memory that stuck. Not the mountains, not the lake, just the back of my own head in a picture I never belonged in. I didn't bring it up. You don't bring those things up, because that would make you dramatic. And in my family, Tanya was the drama. I was the calm, the collected, the reasonable. I became a pro at letting things go, shrinking myself just enough to fit into the space I was given. It took me years to realize that space wasn't love. It was tolerance. And no child should have to feel grateful just to be tolerated. Adulthood snuck up on me quietly. No dramatic coming-of-age moment. No finding myself in Europe trip. I just started working, paying rent, buying groceries, fixing things that broke, and convincing myself that growing up meant letting go of old aches. I did well for myself. Nothing flashy. I wasn't the kind of person who posted about promotions or boss babe energy, but I moved up steadily. First a junior analyst, then lead coordinator. I saved. I budgeted. I handled my own emergencies. And through it all, I stayed connected to my family. Birthdays, holidays, doctor appointments, even tax season, I was the one they called. If Tanya got a parking ticket, I'd Venmo her before she asked. If Mom had a weird charge on her card, I'd call the bank and sort it out. I wanted to believe this was love, that quietly carrying the weight of everyone else meant I mattered. My dad used to call me our steady hand. I wore that phrase like armor. It gave me a role to play, and roles are comforting when belonging feels conditional. But somewhere along the line, I became less of a daughter and more of a convenience. I'd wake up to missed calls from my mother, texts from Tanya with half-finished sentences like, "Can you just," or, "Do you have time to," and I'd jump, always, rearranging my life to fit into theirs, telling myself it was what family does. One year, Tanya's apartment flooded. I left work early, drove across the city in the rain, and helped her box up her stuff. I bought her a hotel room for the night. No one asked me to. They never really had to. When my mom needed dental work that insurance wouldn't cover, I wired her the difference without hesitation. She thanked me with a quick, "You're a lifesaver," followed by, "Don't mention this to your father, he doesn't need the stress." There was always this unwritten rule. I handled the back end, the cleanup, the practical stuff. Tanya handled the spotlight. And my parents? They floated somewhere in between, never questioning the imbalance, never even noticing it. The hardest part wasn't the money. It wasn't the time or the missed opportunities or the emotional labor I poured into keeping everyone afloat. It was the fact that none of it ever translated into real closeness. I wasn't in the family group chat. I wasn't tagged in their family brunch Instagram photos. They loved to say things like, "Marissa's too busy for these little things," when the truth was, I was never asked. The silence was strategic. If they didn't ask, they could pretend I didn't need to be included. If I gave, they'd accept. If I didn't, I was being selfish. It's a strange thing to be both relied on and left out. I remember one afternoon I got a flat tire on the freeway. I'd just finished helping my mom negotiate with her landlord about a plumbing issue in her condo. My phone had 6% battery. I called my dad. He didn't pick up. I sat there on the shoulder for over an hour, eventually calling roadside assistance myself. No one in my family ever found out. I didn't tell them. I didn't want to make them uncomfortable with the idea that I might need help too. That moment stayed with me, not because of the flat tire, but because of the realization that I had trained everyone around me not to worry about me. And in doing so, I'd made myself invisible in the very relationships I worked hardest to maintain. I told myself I was strong, independent, capable. But some nights, alone in my apartment, I wondered, what would it feel like to be on someone's mind when nothing was needed from me? To simply be missed? There's a kind of exhaustion that doesn't show up on your face. It's not the kind that makes your body ache or your eyes heavy. It's the kind that settles deep inside, in the quiet parts of you, and makes everything feel heavier than it should. That's the tired I carried through most of my late 20s. I didn't talk about it. I didn't even have the words for it. I just knew I was always the one expected to be available, to fix what went wrong, to say it's okay before anyone had the decency to apologize. I remember one weekend when Tanya called, crying about a breakup. She'd dated the guy for 4 months, but you'd think she was coming off a 10-year marriage. She wanted to come stay with me. Just for a few nights, she said. She stayed 2 weeks, left dishes in the sink, took calls on speakerphone, cried loudly at midnight, didn't ask once how I was doing, didn't offer to contribute to groceries. When she finally left, she texted me from the Uber, "Thanks for being a safe place." I stared at the screen for a long time. Was that what I was? A safe place that no one cared to maintain? When Mom needed to refinance her condo, she asked me to read through the documents. I did. All 47 pages. Highlighted the risks, called the broker, got her a better rate. She told our relatives Tanya had helped her figure it out. When I gently corrected her later, she laughed and said, "Well, it's not like you care about the credit anyway." And maybe that was the root of it. They assumed I didn't need acknowledgement. That praise was for people like Tanya, fragile, theatrical, full of feelings. I was steady, solid, practical. Praise would bounce right off me, they thought. But they were wrong. I didn't need applause. I just wanted to be seen. I wanted someone to say thank you for always showing up, or even just, how are you really? Instead, I got silence, or worse, expectation. There were stretches where I'd go weeks without hearing from any of them. Then suddenly a flurry of calls when something needed solving. And after I fixed it, back to silence. I started paying attention to patterns. Like how Tanya never called unless she needed a favor. How my mother's tone only softened when she was about to ask for something. How my dad, who once called me his responsible one, only ever brought me up to brag about my work ethic, never about who I was as a person. The worst part wasn't that I gave so much. It was that no one seemed to notice when I stopped giving. 1 month, I didn't send money to help cover Tanya's rent. She didn't ask why. She just texted, "Wow. Okay," and didn't speak to me for 3 weeks. Another time, I forgot my mom's hair appointment reminder. She left a voicemail saying, "I guess I'll just handle things myself now," as if independence was a punishment I had inflicted on her. That voicemail played in my head for days. It struck me then, how deeply I'd been conditioned to believe that my usefulness equaled my worth. That love in my family wasn't something you had. It was something you earned over and over, with labor no one acknowledged and grace no one returned. Some people grow up knowing they are loved, even when they fail. I grew up knowing I was loved when I was useful. And as I stared at that message from my mother, I realized something even harder. I wasn't tired because I was doing too much. I was tired because I knew that if I stopped, even just for a moment, no one would come looking for me. There's a certain kind of loneliness that creeps in slowly. It doesn't come with tears or slammed doors. It arrives through silence. Through birthdays missed, calls unanswered, and the sound of your own voice echoing in a conversation no one's having with you. That's the kind of loneliness I started living with. I used to reach out first. Always. I'd send texts to check in, share articles I thought Mom would enjoy, ask Tanya how her new job was going. Most of the time I got a thumbs up, a one-word answer, or no reply at all. So I stopped texting. No one noticed. I remember a Sunday afternoon when I saw that Tanya had posted a photo from brunch. Mom, Dad, her, some mutual friends. Everyone was smiling, golden light pouring across their faces. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I wasn't there. I'd already assumed I wouldn't be. But because no one even mentioned it to me. Not even after. Not a "you would have loved the place" or a "next time we'll bring you." Nothing. That's the thing about feeling invisible. After a while, you stop expecting to be seen. One day I decided to test it. I called my mom just to talk. No crisis, no bills, just me, wanting to connect. She picked up, sounded surprised. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Just calling to say hi." She paused. "Well, I'm in the middle of something right now, sweetie. Can I call you back?" She didn't. A week later, Tanya left a voicemail. "Hey, not sure if Mom told you, but I'm planning a little get-together for Dad's birthday. Nothing big, just close family and some friends. Thought you should know." Thought I should know? Not an invitation? Just information. I didn't ask for details. I didn't follow up. I sent a card, signed my name. No note. They didn't thank me. That's when I started realizing the difference between presence and participation. I had been present in their lives, financially, emotionally, logistically. But I had never really been allowed to participate. I was helpful, not cherished. Useful, not missed. Even the things I loved were invisible. I'd been painting on weekends, trying to reconnect with a part of me I'd buried under obligation. I posted one photo of my work online. Tanya liked it, but never said a word. Mom didn't mention it at all. Weeks later, she called to ask if I could edit Tanya's resume. "She's applying to a new firm," she said. "You're good with words, right?" I hesitated. "Marissa?" she asked, as if I were already late in responding. I agreed. Of course I did. And when Tanya landed the job, I watched her post about it, thanking her mentor, her roommate, even her dog. But not me. That one stung more than I wanted to admit, because it wasn't about credit. It was about being remembered, acknowledged, seen. Sometimes the greatest betrayal isn't loud. It's not slamming doors or cruel words. It's the soft forgetting. The way people let you slip out of their lives inch by inch while still calling you family. I told myself I was too sensitive, that I needed to grow up, that families were messy, imperfect, complicated. But late at night, lying awake, I kept coming back to one thought. Maybe it wasn't that I expected too much. Maybe they were giving me exactly what they believed I deserved. And maybe that was the most painful part of all. I used to mark family gatherings on my calendar with a small heart, just a little reminder that maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time someone would ask me how I was doing. Not what I could do for them, but over time, the hearts turned into question marks. Then, eventually, nothing at all. I started skipping things. Quietly. No big declarations, no angry texts or dramatic exits. I just faded out. One Thanksgiving, I told them I had to work late. I didn't. I made soup at home, sat on the couch with my legs tucked under a blanket, and watched old black and white movies. It was the first time in years I didn't feel like I had to be on. No one called to ask where I was. The next day, I scrolled through photos on Tanya's social media. The whole family was there. Laughter, pies, matching sweaters. There was even a post captioned, "So grateful for the ones who matter most." I wasn't tagged. I wasn't even mentioned. I told myself it was okay. That I preferred the quiet anyway. That I'd rather be alone than invisible in a crowded room. But sometimes, in the middle of folding laundry or brushing my teeth, the grief would hit me like a wave. Not because I missed them, but because they didn't miss me. I tried to remind myself of the facts. I was independent. I had a good job. I paid my own bills. I had friends who actually listened when I spoke. But none of that made the silence from my family hurt any less. It's strange how quickly distance becomes habit. How easily you slip into a life where holidays are just days off, and birthdays are remembered by calendar alerts, not phone calls. One spring, I got an email from a cousin I hadn't heard from in years. She was planning a family reunion. Said she wanted everyone to feel included. Everyone. I didn't respond. I stared at the blinking cursor in the reply box for 5 full minutes. Then I closed my laptop. It wasn't bitterness. It was clarity. I had spent years asking to be chosen. Quietly, patiently. Through good deeds, through helpfulness, through showing up over and over again. And not once had anyone said, "We want you here." Not just for what you do, for who you are. That's when the dream started to unravel. The dream that if I was kind enough, generous enough, steady enough, They would love me the way I had always needed to be loved. I realized I had built my entire identity around being useful to people who didn't even know my favorite color, who couldn't tell you the last book I read or what kind of music I played when I cleaned my apartment, people who only saw me when they needed something. It's a hard thing to admit that your family might never become the version of themselves you were waiting for. Harder still to accept that you've been shrinking for years to keep the peace. There wasn't a breaking point, just a slow, quiet shift. The hearts came off the calendar. The texts stayed unsent. And I stopped hoping the phone would ring on my birthday. Success doesn't always come with confetti. Sometimes it looks like an email at 6:42 a.m. with the subject line, "Contract approved." No fanfare, no champagne. Just you, sitting in a hoodie with your third cup of coffee, staring at the screen as the realization sinks in. You did it. That's how it was for me. After months of proposals, late nights, and endless data reviews, my firm had landed a major deal. And the project I had led, the one they said was too ambitious, had just been greenlit. It was the biggest professional win of my life. I sat there in my tiny kitchen, toast untouched, laptop glowing. For a minute, I didn't move. Then I laughed. Out loud. The kind of laugh that comes not from joy exactly, but from relief. From knowing all the weight you've carried might finally mean something. I texted Dahlia, my best friend since college. She replied with a dozen fire emojis and a string of capital letters. "You did that. I am screaming." She called 2 minutes later and screamed some more. "Please tell me you're going to celebrate." I wasn't planning to, but then I thought of my mom, and that's when the old hope crept in, the one I had buried and buried again. Maybe this would be the thing that made them see me, not just as the reliable one or the practical one, but as someone who built something, who mattered. So I called her. She picked up after 3 rings. "Hello?" "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. "I have some news." "Oh?" She sounded distracted, like she was in the middle of folding laundry. "I just got the green light on that major account I told you about. The one I was pitching for months? They approved it, fully. It's a pretty big deal." She was quiet for a second. "Well, that's good, sweetie." "Good, sweetie." That was it. Then she added, "You know Tanya's thinking of launching her own wellness brand? She's been brainstorming logos all weekend. She's really got the entrepreneurial spirit." I don't know what I expected. A little enthusiasm? A question? Even a congratulations would have been something. Instead, I got the usual redirect. From my moment to hers. From my achievement to Tanya's potential. I nodded, though she couldn't see it. "That's great," I said. "I hope it goes well." We hung up 5 minutes later. She never asked for details about the deal. She never called back. But I couldn't let go of the idea that maybe, just maybe, they'd celebrate it in their own way. A quiet dinner, a mention to family, something. 2 days later, I got a text from my dad. "Can you come home next weekend? Mom's trying to organize a little something for Tanya's soft launch. Would be great if you could help with setup." Help with setup. Of course. It wasn't about me. It never was. Still, I said yes. Because underneath all the bruises and all the history, there was still that flicker of a child who wanted to be seen. So I took the train home, brought a bottle of wine, wore the dress my mom once said made me look put together. I showed up early, set the table, lit the candles, made polite conversation. When people asked what I did, I smiled and gave the simple version. No one pressed. Tanya stood up halfway through dinner and gave a little toast. Thanked everyone for believing in her. My mom dabbed her eyes. No one mentioned me. I went back to my apartment that night with a headache and the wine still unopened. I stared at it on my counter. The bottle I thought we'd drink together. The one I brought to celebrate. Instead, I opened it alone. And with each sip, I let go of the fantasy that success would finally be enough. Because in this family, it never mattered what I built. It only mattered who they chose to applaud. And I'd finally stop pretending it might one day be me. Some rejections don't come in raised voices or slammed doors. They come in soft tones, in careful pauses, in the sound of your name being held just a second too long, like the person saying it already regrets what they're about to say. It was early December when my mother called. The holidays were approaching, and I had this ridiculous hope that maybe this year things would be different. Maybe we'd sit around the same table. Maybe there'd be laughter, or at the very least, something that resembled peace. So when her name popped up on my phone, I answered quickly. Hey, Mom. She was quiet for a second, like she was gathering her words. Hi, Marissa. I just wanted to check in before Christmas. Her tone was measured, careful. I sat down. Sure, I said. What's going on? Another pause. Well, Tanya and Ryan are hosting this year, at their new place. It's kind of a big deal for them, you know? Their first Christmas together. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. That's great. I'm happy for them. Yes, and they're trying to keep it intimate. Just very close friends and family. There it was. That strange shift in her voice. That soft excuse wrapped in pretty paper. I waited. So, she continued, they were thinking it might be simpler if we kept it small this year. No pressure on anyone, you understand. She didn't say it outright. She didn't have to. I wasn't invited. I looked at the calendar on my wall. There was a little star next to the 24th, just something I'd put there without thinking. A quiet hope. And then she added something that stuck with me. I just don't want it to feel uncomfortable. Tanya said it might be a little awkward given everything. Given everything? I wanted to ask what everything meant. Was it everything I'd done for them? Everything I hadn't said? Everything I'd silently carried? But I didn't ask. Instead, I said, so I'm not welcome. My voice came out even, controlled. She exhaled. Don't say it like that. It's not about being welcome, it's about peace, about keeping things light. You know how Tanya gets. I almost laughed. Keeping things light. Got it, I said. Well, I hope it's a wonderful party. I hung up before she could respond. Then I sat there, staring at the little star on my calendar, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel shocked. I didn't even feel hurt. I felt done. That night, I ordered Chinese food, poured a glass of wine, and watched the snow fall outside my window. It was quiet, still, and I realized I'd been waiting for a moment like that for years. Not the rejection, but the clarity. Because what my mother didn't know, what Tanya would never admit, and what I had finally come to accept, was this. I had always been too much and never enough at the same time, too distant to be included, too reliable to be considered vulnerable, too independent to be asked how I was doing, too quiet to be missed. I spent my whole life trying to earn space at a table that was never set for me, and this time they didn't forget to invite me. They chose not to. That was the difference. That was the wound. But it was also the beginning of something else, something I hadn't had in a very long time. Permission. Permission to stop showing up where I wasn't seen, permission to grieve what never was, instead of chasing what would never be. Permission to leave, not bitter, not angry, just free. I didn't cry that night, I thought I would. I even set the tissue box beside me like I was giving myself permission, but the tears never came. Instead, I sat in silence, wrapped in a thick gray blanket. The TV was on, but I couldn't tell you what I was watching. My mind was somewhere else, somewhere deeper, somewhere tired. There's a kind of heartbreak that doesn't shatter you. It just drains you. You don't fall to pieces. You simply stop trying. That's where I was. The next morning, I made a list. Not a dramatic cut them off forever kind of list, just a simple one. A private inventory of every task, every responsibility, every invisible role I'd taken on over the years. Monthly transfers to Mom's account, emergency rent for Tanya, tech support for Dad, birthday reminders, flight bookings, holiday planning, group texts that I sent, group photos I wasn't in. It was longer than I expected. At the bottom, I wrote a single question. If I stopped doing all of this, who would notice? I stared at the question for a long time. Then I pulled out my laptop, opened my banking app, and canceled the recurring transfers. Next, I drafted a short email to Mom. Hey, just a quick note to let you know I'll be stepping back from managing your bills. I've set up everything to autopay for the next 3 months, so you're not left in the lurch. After that, it's best for you to take over. I'm happy to walk you through it if you'd like. Love, Marissa. I didn't wait for a reply. Then came the group chat, the one I had created years ago for family updates. I typed one final message. Hi all, just wanted to let you know I won't be managing this thread anymore. Feel free to stay connected however works for you. Take care. Then I left the group. Just like that. There was no explosion, no fallout, just silence. For a moment I wondered if I was being petty, if this was just some immature way of getting back at them. But then I remembered something my therapist once said. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop making it easy for people to use you. I had been making it easy for years, so I stopped. Not with a bang. With a quiet, steady turning of the handle, a slow closing of the door. And as that door clicked shut, I felt something shift inside me. Not freedom yet, but something like it. I spent the next few days walking. Long, wandering walks with no destination. I let the cold air bite at my cheeks. I listened to music that made me feel things. I deleted old voicemails I had kept just in case. One afternoon, I stood in the middle of my living room and said out loud, "I don't owe them anymore." It felt strange at first, like I was rehearsing a line I didn't fully believe. But then I said it again, and again, until my voice stopped shaking. I wasn't seeking revenge. I didn't want an apology. What I wanted, what I finally gave myself, was distance. Not the kind measured in miles, the kind measured in peace. I didn't plan revenge. That's not who I am, not really. But I did start planning something else. Clarity has a strange way of sharpening your instincts. Once you stop begging for love, your brain gets quiet enough to start asking better questions. Like, what do I really want? And more importantly, what do I deserve? It started with a conversation. Dahlia and I were having coffee in a quiet corner of our favorite bookstore. I hadn't told her everything, not yet, but she'd known me long enough to read the space between my sentences. "You've spent your entire life trying to be needed," she said gently. "What if you just stopped?" I stirred my drink. I did stop. "Good," she said. "Now what are you going to build in that empty space?" That question sat with me for days. I wasn't sure at first. I just knew I didn't want to feel helpless anymore. So I started digging. Not emotionally, financially. I went through old bank statements, property listings, loan documents I had been casually copied on over the years. Tanya had always been sloppy with details, and my father had a habit of assuming I'd just take care of things. That was their mistake. They never imagined I'd start reading the fine print. That's when I saw it. An old loan application, a second mortgage taken out in Tanya's name, but with my signature. Only I never signed it. At first I thought it was a glitch, some clerical error. Then I looked closer. The handwriting, the date, the way my name curved in a way it never had before. It wasn't an accident. They had forged my signature, used my credit, used me. I sat there holding the printout, my hands shaking. Not from fear, but from recognition. Everything I had felt for years had just been confirmed in one neat line of black ink. They didn't just take me for granted. They took me for a resource. Something about that moment changed me. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I didn't scream or break anything. I got online, and I found a lawyer. His name was Ethan Hart. A quiet, steady man with kind eyes and a sharp mind. Dahlia had referred me. He listened, took notes, asked questions no one had ever asked me before. Then he leaned back and said, "They committed fraud. You know that, right?" I nodded. "And you have options." Those 4 words did something to me. They unlocked a part of me I didn't know I had, the part that could choose herself. We started building a case, not for court. I wasn't interested in lawsuits or headlines. I wanted leverage, protection, understanding, and freedom. As we mapped everything out, something else emerged. A property, the lake house, the one my parents had always dreamed of retiring in, the one Tanya had tried to flip as part of one of her failed ventures. Turns out she'd defaulted on a private loan and the house was quietly headed for auction. I checked the date. I checked my savings. I checked my nerve. And then I bought it. Not in my name, of course. Through a holding company. 1 signature, 1 wire transfer, and just like that, I owned the one thing they never thought I'd want. The thing they assumed was theirs by default. But I didn't buy it for them. I bought it for me. Not to hurt, not to brag, to reclaim, to remind myself that I could create something permanent, something no one could take, something I didn't have to apologize for. That night I drove out there alone, no music, just the sound of my own breath. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, closed it behind me, and for the first time in my life I felt what it meant to own something fully. Not a house, not a piece of land, but a decision. Mine. I never planned on going back for Christmas, not after last year, not after the silence, not after everything I had uncovered, signed, bought, and claimed. But something inside me needed closure, not revenge, not reconciliation, just an ending. So I packed a small overnight bag, baked my grandmother's cranberry bread, because some rituals are ours no matter who forgets us, and I drove to the house I once called home. It was Tanya's turn to host again. New location, bigger space, more lights, more curated perfection, same old family. I arrived early, before the party started, while the driveway was still mostly empty. I rang the bell, gift in hand, a wrapped box that looked innocent enough. My mother opened the door. Her eyes widened for a split second before she adjusted her expression into something between confusion and annoyance. "Marissa, I didn't think—" "I know," I said. "I'm not staying long, I just wanted to drop something off." She hesitated, stepped aside. Inside, the place looked like a holiday catalog threw up all over the walls, glittering garlands, polished wood floors, jazz versions of carols playing just a little too loudly. Tanya appeared from the kitchen in a velvet dress that probably cost more than my car's monthly payment. She froze when she saw me, then gave a tight smile. "Well, this is unexpected. Isn't it?" I said, handing her the box. She took it warily. "What is it?" "Open it," I said. The room felt colder somehow, like even the lights knew something was off. Tanya peeled back the wrapping paper. Inside was a manila envelope. She opened it, read the first page, then the color drained from her face. It was the deed to the lake house. And the second document? Proof of the forged loan application. She looked up at me, eyes wide. "You bought it?" "I did." "You went behind our backs?" I tilted my head. "No, I walked through the front door. You just never noticed." My father entered the room, confused by the tension. "What's going on?" Tanya shoved the papers at him. His expression shifted in slow motion, confusion, disbelief, then anger. "You had no right." "I had every right," I said calmly. "You used my name, my credit, my silence. You assumed I'd never push back." Mom stepped in, voice trembling. "Marissa, if you wanted to be part of things—" "I did," I said softly. "For years. And all I ever heard was how Tanya needed more help, more time, more understanding." I looked around the room. But not anymore. They didn't yell. No one raised their voice. They didn't have to, because power doesn't always speak loudly. Sometimes it just stands still and refuses to apologize. I turned to leave. Tanya called after me. "You're really not going to give it back?" I paused at the doorway. "No, I'm not." "But it's not fair," she said. "That house meant something to all of us." I looked at her. "So did I." I walked outside into the cold. The air hit me like a wave, but I felt warmer than I had in months. In the distance, I could still hear muffled music, laughter forced back into rhythm, the party struggling to keep going. But I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Because that night, I didn't just take back a house. I took back my place in the story. Not as the background character, not as the fixer, not as the quiet one who waits to be seen. I stepped into my own narrative. And this time, I didn't ask for permission. The lake house was quiet when I arrived, not the kind of quiet that feels empty or eerie, the kind that wraps around you like a thick sweater on a cold morning, a silence that asks nothing of you. I walked through the front door with no audience, no plan, and no one to please. Just me. It had been less than a week since Christmas. Less than a week since I dropped the envelope into Tanya's hands and watched the illusion collapse. And now, here I was, holding the keys to a house that once symbolized someone else's dream, now the backdrop for mine. It still smelled like old cedar and lake air. The furniture was sparse, a little outdated, beige walls, thick curtains, family photos still hanging on the walls like ghosts. I didn't take them down. Not yet. I just walked from room to room, barefoot, letting the wood creak beneath me. The kitchen had a chipped tile near the sink I hadn't noticed before. The fireplace still had charred wood from the last time someone used it, maybe a year ago. The upstairs bedroom overlooked the water. That's where I set my bag down. That night, I didn't unpack. I didn't scroll or call anyone or open a bottle of wine. I just stood at the back porch and looked out at the frozen lake, wrapped in layers of gray and silver. It wasn't beautiful exactly, not like a postcard, but it was honest, and I needed that more than I needed beauty. For so long, I had been moving through life reacting, adjusting, making room for other people's comfort, stretching myself to fit into molds I never chose. But here, for the first time, nothing was expected of me. I didn't have to perform, didn't have to solve, didn't have to ask for space. I already owned it. The next morning, I woke up with the sun bleeding through the curtains. The house was colder than I expected, so I padded downstairs in thick socks and made a cup of coffee. I drank it on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, knees pulled to my chest, and I just sat. No calendar, no inbox, no text from Tanya, no missed calls from Mom, only the sound of the wind moving through bare trees and a kind of stillness that felt unfamiliar at first, like a language I used to speak but forgot over time. I didn't know what came next. That was both terrifying and thrilling, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing after anyone. I wasn't waiting for recognition. I wasn't performing worthiness. I was just breathing, existing, in a space that I didn't have to share, explain, or justify. I know it might sound small, but to me, it was revolutionary. Later that day, I started a fire in the fireplace. It took a few tries. I singed a piece of newspaper and cursed under my breath. But when the flames finally caught, I sat in front of them and watched them dance like I had nowhere else to be. Because I didn't. I was exactly where I needed to be. Not to prove anything, just to feel what it was like to belong somewhere without having to earn it. The second morning, I opened every curtain in the house. The light came in slow and golden, casting long shadows across the floors. It settled into corners that hadn't seen sun in years. I let it. I spent the rest of the day cleaning, not in a frantic, burn-it-all-down way, more like an offering, a quiet act of reclaiming. I started in the living room, dusting shelves, wiping fingerprints from the glass cabinet doors. I found things I hadn't expected. A deck of cards with a bent corner, a book with my father's name in faded ink, a small, rusted music box tucked behind a stack of board games. When I turned the key, it played a soft, off-key lullaby that made me pause. I didn't throw any of it away. Not yet. Some memories are too tangled to toss on the first pass. I worked room by room, replacing heavy drapes with linen ones I found in a box labeled "Summer Things," rearranging furniture until the space felt less like a waiting room for someone else's dream and more like a place I might actually rest. I put on music, old jazz, the kind with soft horns and long silences. I lit a candle that smelled like cedar and something slightly sweet, maybe vanilla or memory. I don't know. I just know it made the space feel warm. By afternoon, I had moved into the bedroom fully, unpacked my clothes, lined a drawer with old wallpaper I found in the closet. I hung one of my own paintings, a soft watercolor I'd done years ago and never showed anyone, right above the headboard. And I looked at it, really looked at it, for the first time. It was peaceful. Not perfect, but real. That night, Dahlia called. "How's the new kingdom?" she asked. I laughed. "Dusty, but good." She was quiet for a second. "I'm proud of you, you know," she said. "Not for buying the house, for staying in it." It hit me harder than I expected. Because she was right. Owning something is one thing. Letting yourself belong to it, that's different. That takes trust. That takes choosing not to run the minute things get quiet. And things were quiet. No one from my family had reached out. Not a text, not a call, not even a vague Facebook message asking how I was doing. I thought it might hurt. It didn't. If anything, it confirmed what I already knew. That silence wasn't punishment. It was truth. And in that truth, I found space. To think, to grieve, to laugh out loud when a cabinet door fell off its hinge unexpectedly, to make dinner without rushing, to take long baths and longer walks, to wake up without a tightness in my chest. For the first time in years, I wasn't living in reaction to someone else. I was just living. That may sound simple, but after decades of being the afterthought, the background, the fix-it girl, simple felt like a revolution. A few days later, Dahlia came to visit. She showed up in her usual way, arms full of groceries, wearing mismatched socks, and humming like she owned the world. "This place smells like cedar and second chances," she said as she walked in. I smiled. "You always did have a way with words." She looked around, taking everything in. The light, the open space, the painting above the bed, the absence of noise. "I like it," she said. "It feels like you." I wasn't sure what that meant. What did me even feel like? We spent the afternoon making soup from scratch. She chopped vegetables while I set the table. Nothing fancy. Just warmth in a bowl and laughter that echoed off the kitchen walls. We talked about everything and nothing. Old roommates, her latest terrible date, the time we got lost in Maine and ended up at that gas station with the haunted soda machine. It felt good to remember things that had nothing to do with my family. Over dinner, she looked at me and said, You seem lighter. I paused. Maybe I am, I said. Or maybe I'm just not carrying their expectations anymore. She nodded. You always did carry more than your share. I thought if I kept carrying it, eventually they'd see me. And now? I took a breath. Now I just want to see myself. We clinked glasses, not in celebration, in recognition. Later, after she left, I sat on the porch with a blanket and a journal. I hadn't written in years, but the words came like they'd been waiting. Not poetry, not plans, just pieces, little truths I hadn't had space to say out loud. I am tired of being strong because no one else will be. I am allowed to miss people who hurt me and still not want them back. I am learning how to love without disappearing inside it. That night, I slept with the window cracked open and dreamed of quiet lakes and floating lanterns. When I woke up, there were birds outside the window. Ordinary things, really. But they felt like signs. That I was here. That I was whole. That I was beginning again, not as someone new, but as someone finally allowed to just be. The next few days were slow, soft. I started a morning routine, coffee, a walk, reading a few pages of something with no productivity attached. I found an old set of watercolors and began painting again. Nothing grand, just little moments. A chipped mug, a curled leaf, the way light moved across the hallway in the afternoon. I didn't share them. I didn't need anyone to like them. They were for me. One afternoon I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just my name in careful handwriting. It was from my mother. A folded card. No apology, no explanation, just 6 words scribbled inside. Hope you're doing well? Mom. I stared at it for a long time. Then I folded it back up and tucked it into a drawer. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel relief. Just clarity. Some people offer breadcrumbs and call it love. I wasn't hungry anymore. The lake began to thaw in early March. At first it was just a thin line along the edge, a shimmer of movement in the stillness. Then cracks spread like veins across the ice, softening what had once seemed permanent. I watched it happen from the porch with a mug of tea in my hands and a quiet smile that felt earned. That's how healing works sometimes, not with fireworks, with subtle shifts. One morning I rearranged the living room, again. Not because it needed it, but because I was curious. What would it feel like to sit facing the window instead of the fireplace? What would change if I gave myself permission to change things just because I wanted to? The answer? Everything. I started letting small joys guide me. New recipes, fresh sheets, long walks on muddy trails. I didn't document them. I didn't turn them into lessons. I just lived them. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to earn that kind of peace. It was mine. Dahlia visited once more before spring, bringing tulips and stories from the city. She asked if I planned to stay here long term. I told her I didn't know. And that was the truth. I didn't need to know. I just needed to keep choosing myself, one quiet day at a time. I was no longer trying to fix anyone, no longer hoping someone might show up differently, no longer waiting for a moment that would finally explain why things happened the way they did. Some stories don't resolve, they release. One evening, I opened the drawer where I'd kept my mother's card. I read it again. The 6 words hadn't changed. But I had. It no longer felt like an invitation. It felt like what it was, an echo, and I didn't need to answer echoes anymore. I wrote her back, not out of anger, but out of clarity. A short note. I'm doing well, hope you are too. Marissa. I mailed it the next day without expectation. Closure, I'd learned, isn't something they give you. It's something you make with your own 2 hands. I spent that weekend planting herbs in small ceramic pots and hanging wind chimes by the kitchen window. I painted the back hallway a soft sage green. I took a photo of the sunrise, just for me. And when I sat down that evening, alone but not lonely, I whispered a quiet truth I hadn't dared to say out loud before. I forgive you. Not because you asked, not because you changed, but because I'm done carrying what you refused to hold. That forgiveness wasn't a gift to them. It was the weight I finally put down. And when I looked out at the lake, half-thawed, reflecting the pale gold sky, I understood something I never had before. You don't need a perfect ending to begin again. You just need to walk away with your name intact. And that, after everything, was exactly what I had. The house didn't change overnight, but I did, little by little. Like the ice on the lake, something inside me softened. A part of me that had lived in survival mode for years was finally allowed to rest. There were no grand declarations, no dramatic reinventions, just a series of small, steady choices that stitched together a different kind of life. I stopped setting alarms. Not because I didn't have things to do, but because I finally trusted myself to wake when I was ready. Most mornings I rose with the light, made coffee the slow way, sat by the window while the kettle hummed and the steam curled into the cold air. I'd wrap myself in a blanket and listen to the wind, the birds, the creak of old wood settling into its own weight. The house was still unfamiliar in places. Certain floorboards groaned under my step like they were trying to speak. The guest room door never closed quite right. A painting left behind by the previous owners tilted no matter how many times I straightened it. But it didn't bother me. I wasn't trying to fix everything anymore. Some things were allowed to be a little crooked. I started writing again. Not for work. Not for anyone else. Just for me. Short thoughts. Fragments. One-line confessions scribbled on napkins and notepads and sticky notes stuck to the fridge. I feel calm today, and that scares me more than chaos ever did. There's a difference between solitude and loneliness, and I finally know what it is. Peace doesn't shout. It whispers. And you have to be quiet long enough to hear it. I put some of those lines into a notebook. Others I burned in the fireplace, letting the paper curl into smoke like offerings to the version of me that never got to speak. I also picked up my paintbrush again. It felt clumsy at first, like trying to speak a language I used to know fluently but hadn't used in years. But then the strokes came easier, soft colors, natural shapes, abstract moments that didn't try too hard to be beautiful. Just honest. One canvas turned into two, two into four. I hung one above the kitchen sink, another in the hallway. They weren't masterpieces, but they were mine, and that was enough. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection in the mirror and barely recognize myself, not because I looked different, but because I wasn't performing anymore. I didn't have to smile unless I wanted to, didn't have to explain my choices to anyone, didn't have to shrink or expand based on someone else's expectations. I just was. I even started talking to myself again, out loud. Little things like, good job when I fixed a leaky faucet. Or you did that when I made a perfect grilled cheese. Or just hey, in the morning, like greeting an old friend. And somewhere in those tiny affirmations, I realized I wasn't waiting for applause anymore. I had finally become my own witness. There was no audience, just presence, just breath, just the slow, quiet unfolding of a life that no longer required validation to feel real. One evening, I lit every candle in the house, not because anyone was coming over, but because I wanted the room to feel warm when I walked into it. I played Nina Simone on vinyl, poured a glass of wine, and sat in front of the fire. No one knew where I was in that moment. No one asked. And still, I had never felt more held. Not by people, by peace. The kind of peace you don't beg for. The kind you build slowly from the pieces of yourself you used to give away too easily. And in that silence, in that soft orange glow, I whispered the truest thing I've ever said. I'm home. Dahlia showed up on a Tuesday afternoon with 2 bags of groceries, a bottle of red wine, and the same chaotic energy she'd had since college. She didn't ask if I needed company. She just came. You've been living like a recluse long enough, she said, setting things down in the kitchen. Time for vegetables, conversation, and something baked with way too much butter. I didn't argue. She moved around the space like it belonged to her, too. Opened drawers without asking, tossed her scarf over the back of the chair, put on music. It wasn't invasive. It was comforting. Like someone reminding you you're allowed to be known. We cooked without rushing, chopped onions while trading memories, argued over whether thyme or rosemary belonged in the soup, shared spoonfuls and adjusted flavors like we were auditioning for a cooking show neither of us signed up for. After dinner, we sat by the fire, glasses in hand, feet tucked under blankets. Outside, the lake was still, reflecting the pale glow of a half moon. Inside, it smelled like garlic and something sweet. Dahlia turned to me and said, "You're different." Different how? Calmer, like you finally stopped clenching. I laughed. Did I used to clench? She raised her eyebrows. Girl, your entire spine was one long apology. I sipped my wine. I guess I'm learning. She looked around the room. It's good here, you're good here. I nodded. There was a long silence, but not the uncomfortable kind, the kind you only get with people who've earned it, people who don't need to fill every space with sound. Eventually, she said, Do they know where you are? Not really. Do you care? I thought about it. I used to, I said. Every time my phone didn't ring, I told myself it was fine, but I was lying. I wanted them to notice. I wanted someone to say, "Where is she?" or "Let's call her." But they never did. And now I don't want to be found by people who only ever noticed me when they needed something. Dahlia leaned her head back against the couch. You know, I've always admired how much you gave, even when no one deserved it. That wasn't generosity, I said. That was desperation dressed as kindness. She looked at me. No, it was love. It just wasn't returned the way it should have been. I didn't say anything for a moment, because I knew she was right, and also I knew she was different. Dahlia had never needed me to be anything other than who I was. She didn't ask for proof. She didn't measure my worth in what I gave her. She just stayed. Year after year, job changes, breakups, silent seasons. Even when I disappeared into family drama or busyness or sadness, she never made me beg for her place in my life. She knew it was hers, and maybe that's what real love looks like. Not grand gestures, not constant contact, but someone showing up without being asked, someone remembering your favorite tea, someone lighting the candles without making it about ambiance. Someone saying, "You're allowed to be tired. I'll be here when you're ready." That night, as we cleaned up the kitchen and put leftovers into mismatched containers, I felt something click into place. The kind of click that doesn't echo, it settles. Later she hugged me goodbye at the door, tight and wordless. "You sure you're okay out here?" she asked, half teasing. "I'm more than okay," I said. "I'm whole," she smiled. "You've always been whole, Marissa. You just stopped looking for mirrors and people who refuse to reflect you." When she drove off, I stood on the porch a little longer than I needed to, breathing in the cold, letting her words sink in. I had spent so long trying to find myself in people who only showed me fragments. And all this time, the clearest reflection of who I really was had been standing beside me, holding soup and sass and unconditional grace. It had been almost 3 months since Christmas, 3 months since the envelope, since the silence, since I stopped waiting for anything from them. Then Tanya showed up. I didn't expect it. There was no warning, no text, no call. Just a silver SUV I recognized from a distance crawling down the long gravel driveway. I watched from the porch, coffee in hand, heart steady. She stepped out in heels, always impractical, always theatrical. Same oversized sunglasses, same carefully styled hair, but she looked tired, like someone who wasn't used to being told no. "Marissa," she said, stepping toward me. "Hey." I nodded. "Hey." She shifted awkwardly, like the ground beneath her wasn't as solid as she thought it would be. "Can we talk?" I motioned toward the chairs on the porch. "Sure, have a seat." She didn't. She stood there, arms crossed, eyes scanning the house like she was cataloging every change I had made. "So, you really did it," she said. I didn't respond. Some truths don't require confirmation. She let out a breath. "Look, I'm not here to argue. I'm not here to rehash everything. I want to talk about the house." I raised an eyebrow. "What about it?" She cleared her throat. "It's not just a house. It meant something to all of us. It was part of the family, you know? We all had memories there, and I just think... You think I should give it back?" She blinked. "I think we should talk about what's fair." I sat down, sipped my coffee. "You forged my name on a loan." She didn't deny it. "I didn't know it would go that far," she said. "I was trying to help Mom and Dad. I was under a lot of pressure." I looked out toward the lake. "They pressured me too," I said quietly. "But I didn't cross that line." She hesitated. "I made a mistake." I nodded. "Yes, you did." A long pause. She sat down finally, arms still tight around her body. "I miss you," she said. And it almost worked. Almost. Because there was a time I would have given anything to hear that. But I've learned that sometimes people say, "I miss you," when what they really mean is, "I miss what you used to do for me." "I'm not the same," I said. "I can't go back." She stared at me. "So that's it?" I shrugged. "No one came looking when I left." She looked away. "I didn't know how to fix it," she whispered. "You didn't try." That landed somewhere real. She stood. "You've changed." "I had to," I said. "Peace cost more than I ever imagined. But I paid for it. I'm not giving it back." She took a few steps toward her car, then turned. "You're really not going to let it go, are you?" I stood too. No, because for once I'm choosing me. She didn't argue, didn't cry, didn't slam the door when she drove away. She just left. And this time, I didn't watch the car disappear down the road. I turned back toward the house, the sun now spilling gold across the porch. I stood in the silence, waiting for the guilt to come. It didn't, because saying no isn't cruelty, it's clarity. And when you've spent your life as the easy one, the quiet one, the accommodating one, saying no becomes a revolution. That evening, I poured a glass of wine, walked out to the edge of the lake and breathed in the clean air. Somewhere behind me, a door had closed, but ahead of me, the world had opened, and I wasn't afraid of its quiet anymore. Spring came slowly to the lake, first in color, the pale green tips of trees waking from their sleep, then in sound, birdsong filtering through the windows before sunrise, then finally in warmth. I didn't rush it. I let the season unfold the way I had learned to let myself unfold, with patience, with curiosity, without apology. By now, the house felt like mine in ways I couldn't have imagined months earlier. Not because of the deed or the furniture or the photos I had finally taken off the walls, but because of what it had become. A reflection of peace. There was a rhythm now. Mornings with coffee and bare feet on the porch. Afternoons of painting, reading, sometimes nothing at all. Evenings with candles, good food, and the company of my own thoughts. The silence that used to feel sharp had softened. It no longer reminded me of absence. It reminded me of presence. One morning I sat at the edge of the dock with my sketchpad in my lap. The water was still, not frozen, not moving, just holding, like me. I sketched without looking for form or perfection, just lines, texture, flow, the practice of noticing. Later that day I went into town for the first time in weeks, bought myself a lemon tart from the bakery with the blue shutters, sat outside on a bench under the sun and ate it slowly, like someone who didn't owe anyone an explanation. People walked past with dogs, strollers, bags of groceries. I wasn't part of their stories and they weren't part of mine. And that was okay. I didn't feel invisible anymore. I felt free. That night I opened the windows and let the cool air in. I cooked dinner barefoot, danced a little while stirring the pot, hummed a song I didn't know the words to. No audience, no performance, just joy, quietly blooming. At one point, I looked around the kitchen and whispered to myself, "This is your life. Not the life anyone else chose, not the life they approved, the one I built when no one was watching. And maybe that's the best kind." Sometimes I sit by the window and wonder what they say about me now. Maybe nothing. Maybe they tell themselves I'll come back when I've calmed down. Maybe they think I'm holding a grudge. Maybe they've erased me altogether. But here's what they don't know. I'm not angry, I'm not broken, I'm not waiting, I am building something new every quiet morning, every honest thought, every moment I choose not to chase love where it was never freely given. That is the real work. That is the freedom. People think walking away is the hard part. It's not. The hard part is staying gone when they don't come after you. The hard part is loving yourself enough to not shrink back into the version they were more comfortable with. The hard part is grieving the apology that will never come and learning to live well without it. But here's what I've learned. You don't need their permission to be whole. You don't need their recognition to matter. You don't need their version of love if it always came with conditions. Your peace is valid. Your joy is real. Your life, exactly as it is without their approval, is enough. More than enough. There will always be voices that try to pull you back, that say you owe something, that ask you to be the bigger person. But you don't owe anyone the pieces of yourself you had to fight to reclaim. You get to decide where your story turns. And sometimes it turns quietly. No explosions, no confrontation. Just a woman sitting by a window with a cup of coffee saying to herself, "I'm proud of you." If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, if you've ever poured love into people who only offered silence in return, I want you to hear this. You are not too much. You are not a burden. You are not the problem. You are allowed to outgrow the people who refuse to grow with you. And when you finally choose peace, don't look back. Not because they don't matter, but because you finally do. The camera holds steady on the lake. It's early evening. The sun is low, casting a golden path across the water. Trees sway gently in the breeze. There's no music, just the sound of birds, leaves, and the faint ripple of the lake touching the shore. Marissa steps into frame from the left. She's barefoot, wearing a soft sweater and holding a journal in one hand, a cup of tea in the other. She walks slowly to the edge of the dock, pauses, looks out over the water, then she sits, legs crossed, quiet. The camera lingers on her face, not smiling, not crying, just still, present. There is strength in her stillness. A woman no longer searching. A woman who stopped asking the wrong people to see her and decided to see herself instead. She takes a deep breath, closes her eyes. We hear her voice one last time, calm, steady, certain. Sometimes peace doesn't come from fixing the past. It comes from refusing to carry it into your future. The frame fades to soft light, then black. A final message appears on screen in quiet, elegant type. If you've ever felt unseen, unchosen, or unloved by the people who should have known you best, you are not alone, and you are not broken. You are worthy of a life that doesn't ask you to shrink. Choose peace. Choose you. And don't look back. Share this story if it reminded you of your own. Comment below. If you've ever had to walk away from family to find freedom. Subscribe for more stories about personal liberation, quiet power, and healing from conditional love. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is begin again.